All right, guys. So this is going to be second interview, not interview, interview chat sort of thing with music persons on the channel. First one with Dave from Clatterbox, Dave Kempson. The second one is gwEm. This is really wicked because like gwEm's a friend of mine, and I've known him for quite a while. So I'm really kind of blessed to have him chat with me. It's going to be a wicked interview. I'm really looking forward to this. So I'll just give you a little introduction about gwEm as it were. So obviously very excited to speak to him. I first came across gwEm like around 2001, 2002. It was on micromusic.net. It was on those days they used to there was like a streaming kind of like a streaming not really streaming platform, just like a streaming screen almost, or playlist of chip tunes with chip tune graphics that was hosted in Switzerland, and they play loads of different chip tunes that were kind of mainly made with hardware from lots of different folks. You know, had like Electro Girl, DMX Crew, gwEm, all their 8-bit rockers, all these kind of people. And that's where I came across gwEm initially. And then fast forward about 20 years later, I sort of came across gwEm's channel and just started following his channel with all the kind of hardware talk and everything like that. And then we started, get chatting and whatnot. Um, so so yeah, and obviously got to know each other. Now recently he's put out a lot of stuff over the years, various releases and whatnot. He's got a new release out, which is this Ambient Odyssey, which I've heard already and I love it. It's wicked. Sounds just yeah, it's just great. It's like on that new age kind of vibe, Krautrock, etc. etc. But anyway, I'll let gwEm do the talking because I'd rather him talk about it than me. And I'll just start off with a quick question for, well, probably rather a statement almost. So gwEm, where did your musical journey begin? And what was the kind of shift from sort of like I say a passive listener to more of an active listener, as it were, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, really when I became interested in music, it was, when I first heard the Prodigy experience when I was at school. Uh, I remember it quite clearly, actually. There we were in the middle of an art lesson, and one of the kids, he had Out of Space on his Walkman. I never heard that kind of music before, and I just thought, my mind was blown basically, and I just wanted to be a part of, the music scene and yeah, find out as much about it as I could.
Yeah, yeah. And what were you listening to before at that point? Was it just the radio or
Well, no, not so much. Just
yeah,
sort of a
man.
bit of what my parents were listening to, I suppose. I mean, I was just a nipper,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so yeah, a little bit of grunge maybe.
Yeah, man, because you like your metal as well, don't you? Because you play good. Well, Gwen plays everything, like, but guitar definitely. Yeah, man. No, I remember
Yeah,
the.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, was into Metallica and those type of bands back then. But it was really just the beginning, and obviously your tastes kind of evolve. But it was kind of an interesting time for music then in the early '90s because you really had a bit of everything going on, and the all kinds of music scenes were growing and evolving at the same time, and it
Yeah,
was, you know, evolving so quickly, and you don't really see that type of evolution these days.
no, you're right. It was. My view is it was very competitive, like in the sense it's always competitive, but I think that was my interpretation of events. It's like one person does something, everyone's like, oh, let me see if I can do this and that to better that person or come up with a different angle because everyone wants the tune that's going to attract the attention. What do you think? Do you agree or?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. But also tastes are maybe evolving a bit more slowly. So, like as an example,
Yeah,
if you listen to a tune made in 1992, let's say, and
yeah,
compare it to a tune made in 1993, you can say that's the 1992 one. You can just tell
yeah,
straight
yeah,
away.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Whereas, can you tell a a 2022 tune from a 2023 tune. Not really.
Yeah,
It's
you're right.
the
It's the
styles are
production.
not
Yeah, yeah,
progressing
yeah, yeah.
quite so quickly. And I think maybe there was a bit of competition. Maybe people are a bit more open to experimentation. Um, Electronic music was still very new. I mean, obviously, it's been around since the 70s, but it only became accessible to the enthusiast in the 90s, really, and it was still quite expensive back then to buy a sampler.
Yes,
It was
exactly.
the price of a car, but at least it was the price of a car and not the price of a house. So
I know, I know. I mean, so I guess I mean that kind of leads me on kind of cool in it quite nicely to the question like what's your kind of relationship with making your music making tools? Obviously, what would you say was your first piece of gear and how have you kind of yeah, what's your interaction? What's your view on it? What's your take on it?
yeah, so I mean, the piece of gear that stayed with me the longest is definitely my Atari ST.
Yeah.
Um, but I bought a few other bits and pieces that have sort of fallen by the wayside that I didn't really gel with back then. So
Mm.
one of those being I bought an Akai S20 sampler,
Right, right.
but I didn't really get on with it. I sort of preferred trackers. And I could hear the sound quality was definitely better on the Akai, but the workflow was much slower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, my first synth would have been a Novation Base Station 1, the
Right, right.
keyboard with the turquoise graphics on it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've actually been through quite a few base stations. It's definitely a synth I still keep coming back to. So
Is
yeah,
it the
not
kind of
everything you get you end up liking.
yeah,
Especially back then, you just had magazines to go on. I used to subscribe to Future Music, and that no longer exists. Sound on Sound is really the only one, and we didn't know it back then, but their reviews were really influenced by the advertising budget of
yeah,
the
yeah,
different
yeah, yeah, yeah.
firms, and you could quite often buy something that wasn't quite what you expected.
I know. That's what I've well, exactly. That pretty much sums it up, to be honest. That's what was on my mind as you were saying it. So, I mean, I know we've all been probably hoodwinked into buying gear that we thought maybe should do this, but it doesn't do that, or but um I know the S20, of course. I was in a similar position. I wanted to get a sample and I was like, well, that's the cheapest I could get. But it didn't quite
Yeah,
have what you wanted, didn't have all the time stretching and all the character of the other samplers and whatnot. But you've got a lot, you've got pretty much everything under the sun. Like, so what would you say at the moment is your favorite piece of gear? So, I mean, obviously you mentioned the ST. I've got a few STs myself. Now I've got, my collection's widened, but what would you say your favorite piece of gear is? It the ST? Is it anything else or?
I mean, ultimately, it's always going to be the ST is my favorite piece of gear. But in lockdown, I did buy myself an Amiga,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I've,
man, you got it on
I've got
display.
here, and I've been using that quite a bit the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and that's sort of become quite another essential in my music making, really. Yeah, in terms of synths, yeah, probably the base station, maybe the SH-101. But
Yeah.
these are also synths that a lot
Mm.
of people talk about. But I think there's a reason for that is because they actually are good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I remember when I was buying the Novation base station, it cost me £250.
Wow.
And at
That's
the
serious
same
money.
time, I could have bought a Roland SH-101. It was about the same price.
Right, right,
And
right.
I was looking at the specs. I was like, oh, the SH-101 doesn't have MIDI. It's only got one oscillator. So I'm going to get the base station. But, now that I'm older and a little bit wiser, I wish I'd have got the SH-101 because it definitely it has a certain character that just fits into everything that you do. It always, if you're not sure what sound is
Yeah.
going to fit into your track, if you tried everything,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
then
yeah,
if
yeah, yeah.
you get the SH-101 now, you can always make it work.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I know what you're saying. I got a 606 back in the day, very early. I think I told you know the story anyway. I got a 606 off what was the magazine? Loot.
Mm.
And the chap sent it to me and I used it for maybe a week and I was like at that point I really had very little gear. I just had my Korg module, and I got this 606 because it was kind of like, oh, this is analog, this is kind of cool, and that I
Mm.
like the sounds, but I was like, it's got no MIDI. I'm like, what can I do with this thing? So I taped all the sounds, and I sent it back to him, and I gave him his money back. But now, anyway, so you know what I mean? A similar kind of
Yeah.
thinking. Um,
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, especially with something like the 606, because I mean, it is a nice drum machine, but it doesn't have that big kick drum of the 909, for example, or the low end of an 808 or
yeah,
something. So
yeah,
you get it, and you're a little bit disappointed,
yeah,
and then later you realize, oh, actually the hi hats are amazing,
yeah.
and it's got its own flavor. But yeah, when you first get it, it's like,
You really have to
where's
drive
the
it with some distortion or compression, don't you? Really, I think to kind of get more character from it.
Oh, yeah,
On
it
its
sounds
own, it's
great
a bit
with
flat.
distortion, though. It
Yeah,
does
yeah,
sound
yeah,
good. I used it with a one of those synth wah
yeah,
pedals,
yeah,
and it sounds really good through that.
yeah, man, definitely. Um, God, where do we go from here? Like just release wise, man, you got quite a lot of release. Have you? How much would you say has been physical versus digital over the years? And what was your kind of like? We know what you. I mean, you can tell us about the kind of the first thing that kind of gave you like a real propulsion, which was that tune about your boss. Can you tell
Yeah,
us
right.
about? I think you did a re-upload of the video, or was it edit or something? So you made it high definition and that. Do you want to tell us about that, man?
Yeah, yeah. So I would definitely say most of my music's been released on digital, but there has been some physical releases, and one of those was that well, fuck you, management wanker, FYMW for short.
Yeah,
So I wrote that. Actually, the drum machine on that is the 606
yeah,
that we talked about, and the whole thing was composed in Fast Tracker 2 on I think it probably would have been a 486
wow,
PC, something like that.
wow, wow, wow.
Um, so yeah, a friend of mine was really taken by the tune, and he did the music video.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so for years there was just this really poor quality upload. So recently it was standard def, the version I found. I would like a HD version, but that
you think you
was
can upscale it or something? Or
well, I might be able to. That particular video was shot on film. Even it was shot on
wow,
16 millimeter, so
wow.
it would be ideally you'd kind of re-digitize it from that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, that release was picked up by a record label called Shit Catapult, who are based in Berlin, and they're a sort
yeah.
of punky electronic type of label, very cool. And they did a vinyl release.
Wow, wow, wicked, man.
So yeah, that was like an early
When was that?
success,
Was
if
that
you like.
2000? When was that? About 2003 or something? Or when was that?
Yeah, I think that's about sounds about right.
Not a
Yeah,
bad guess, man. Not a bad
yeah,
guess,
yeah.
man.
No, not a bad guess.
Um, yeah, who else did they have on that label? If it was sort of like, would you say kind of electro
Well,
punk?
it was owned by T. Raumschmiere and Apparat.
Oh,
So
okay.
obviously, Apparat's gone on to
He did one runs Ableton.
do his own label now as
Okay,
well.
okay, okay. I'm thinking of someone else then. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, wicked, man. And then I also the release I've got a few. I don't have all your releases, but the one I got, well, I've got two now, which is obviously the latest one. And I've got the tape you did, which was the breaking and
Yeah.
entering tape, and that was exclusive. How many did you do with that? It was like how many did you do?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I probably should have done more. So I did 69 of those,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they sold out within 3 days. So I think I probably should have done more. But it's better to sell them all than to have them laying around.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's very nice. Especially what was that when gwEm goes camping? That was the one which stood out for me. I was like, yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it was literally called that because I'd just come back from a camping trip and I wasn't sure
No other meaning. That's a good man. That's a good one, man.
what
Um,
else to call it. So the riff in that is also taken from
yeah,
a lot of people think it's Fat Controller
yeah.
Incomplete Darkness. But
Okay.
actually, the Fat Controller, who I understand that that is just an alias for Lunacy, the
Oh, okay,
night
okay, okay. Gotcha,
guy.
gotcha,
But
gotcha.
I'm not 100% on that. But someone told me it was. Anyway, he had sampled it from an old Faithless tune,
Okay.
uh, and that song was called "Rollo Goes Camping."
Serious.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought,
Wow.
all right, well, I've
Oh,
just been
okay, okay,
camping.
yeah,
The
okay.
riff is from Rollo Go. It's got to be called gwEm Goes Camping.
Right,
But
okay.
everyone remembers the Fat Controller tune rather than the Faithless tune.
I need to listen to that. But I
Yeah,
think,
well, I can send you a link.
yeah.
The Fat Controller version is definitely more of a banger. Um,
But you got two versions. You got the Amiga one and the ST one. Is that?
yeah, right. So it's a double-sided tape. So one is got Atari ST rave stuff, a bit more
Yeah,
chip tuney,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and then the flip side is stuff that I'd produced on the Amiga
yeah,
back there. And it's also rave stuff, but it has a bit of a different flavor because it's got that Amiga type of sound.
yeah. Tell us about your tracker, man. Because I've got it on my ST. I'll have to confess I haven't used it yet, man. I should be using. I've got three of these things now, and I specifically upgraded the ST so I could use your tracker. But hands up, you
Yeah,
haven't
yeah,
used it
well,
yet, man.
yeah, maxYMiser. So that is quite an old program now as well. That is over 20 years old
Wow.
since I first released it. So I wanted to create the ultimate Atari ST tracker.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because up until that point, there have been some really good trackers,
Yeah,
but there wasn't a single one that did everything, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we all knew it was possible, but no one wanted to sort of pick up the gauntlet and create it.
Yeah.
Now, I think in retrospect, the reason for that is that it was quite a lot of work
Right,
to
right, right.
actually do that.
Yeah.
But I was young. I didn't really appreciate how much effort it was going to be, so I started this. It took a whole year for the first version.
That's all right. Well, I guess.
Well, I
So
was
we're talking
working on
about
it
how.
quite intensively. I mean, I was spending every evening on it.
Wow.
Even when I was traveling for gigs, I'd work on it in the plane. So I was really going for it.
How the hell do you work on it? So with the ST, how would you? How
Well,
would
I was
you?
using an emulator on a
Oh, I
laptop.
swear I'm with you. Get the SD out of the plane, man.
Yeah, yeah. I had this little ThinkPad back then, like this
Yeah,
little
yeah,
10
yeah.
inch ThinkPad, and I wrote it on that.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, man. Okay. Yeah, I think what was it, Little Desktop or something like that, or something, which was there was an emulator for the PC, wasn't there? Or something. Was it
Mm.
called what was it called? Little
Yeah,
Desktop?
Little Green Desktop
That's
was
the
the name of the website.
that's right,
The
that's right,
emulator
that's
was
right.
called Steam, and
That's
that
it,
is what I
Steam. Yeah,
used
yeah, yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I use Steam and then I'd load up the is it the .ym tunes? I think it's the .ym. Is that the format?
Yeah,
I'd
that's one
load
of the
them up
formats.
and then I'd use the internal sampling, and I'd take the actual bits that I wanted, and then I could put them into my own tunes. So like Beyond the Ice Palace or other bit, that was one thing I did just for the kicks because it was such a nasty like intro. I was like, yeah, that's a
Oh
nice.
yeah, Beyond the Ice Palace is great. The ST version of that tune
I know
is like really moody
it is
and
moody,
really nicely
exactly.
written. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some great ST tunes though. I mean, like absolutely. What would you like? We'll try and keep this one brief on the ST thing.
Mm.
Who would you say was your favorite composer, like ST wise, though, like for the ST heads out there?
Oh, I mean, there's so many good composers. You see, the thing is, the ST scene is quite small
I
compared
know.
to other scenes like the Amiga scene or the PC
Right.
scene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But despite that, the people who are active on it, the level is very high.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I would name guys like DMASC,
Right.
505, Tau. Those are and all three of those guys are still somewhat active and
Yeah, yeah.
making tunes on the ST as well.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about retrospective, like the video game composers, but you've answered the
Oh
question.
yeah, the video game composers. Well, you see, I like the I mean, I do like the video game stuff, but I like the modern stuff people are doing a
Is it
little bit
just
more.
what, just more interesting and stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think people are taking more risks with the sound
Yeah.
design and
And the melodies and stuff.
different range of styles.
Yeah. I guess it's a kind of partially loaded question, not loaded as such, because I was thinking to myself, well, what springs to mind for me was, of course, for me personally, would have been Tim Follen. I got to speak
Mm,
to him in the early 2000s, luckily, and he was like, when I talked to him, like, I was like, wow, Tim Follen, I'm getting to speak to the guy who made all the music for like all the Capcom tunes and everything like that. And he was just like, oh, that period was rubbish, man. Like, he's completely downplaying it, and he was saying how frustrating it was using the ST, and his influences were like, I don't know, OMD and Tubular Bells and all these kind of
mm,
things. But that was for me, like you hear that music, that was my experience of listening to music to start with, was through the
mm,
ST. That's when I kind of, you listen to the tunes on the Spectrum or the ST. That's how you became familiar with music back in the day. And then, you'd hear what my sister was playing on her taped bits of music from the charts and that. So, but you didn't come at it quite like that. You came at is that right or not? Or were you playing games?
yeah, I mean that's true because like remember we got the ST. It was a present from my gran, and I
Yeah,
shared it with my brother. One of my dad's mates at work, he had an ST, so quite often my dad would show up with discs that he'd copied from his mate.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember watching some of the early demos, and I don't know, it just didn't really speak to me back then. But later I got into it. That's why I sort of prefer the new school stuff because there's a bit more design and stuff to latch onto.
yeah,
And particularly, I think a lot of my mates had an Amiga, with the sampled audio. Now, to me back then, it just seemed like the Amiga had much better audio than the ST. Now,
yeah, yeah,
we know now that's not actually the case. They're just chalk and cheese. They're very different.
yeah,
When you listen to those old Amiga tunes, some of them are a bit too crusty,
yeah. Right.
and some of them haven't aged that well.
Okay.
Some
Okay.
better than others,
Yeah.
granted. But those ST tunes, they've got loads of high end. They still cut through really well because it's based around a basic synthesizer. So
Right. Right. I see what you're saying. Yes, of course.
So you can't really
I
say one's
think
better than the other.
I think obviously when the ST became the STE, it was kind of like the best of both worlds. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I mean, it should have been, yeah, but the problem is
Yeah.
they I don't think at the back in the 90s they didn't make the most of the extra capabilities of the STE,
Yeah.
well, which maximizer does support, so you can combine samples and the chip tune sound, so you do
Yeah.
get the best of both. But that's only happened relatively recently.
Yeah. Um, The ST didn't sell that well though, which is surprising. I looked on, I was like, wow, that was a great machine, and it sold not very few units compared to the ST. And of course, the Falcon was not even that great even afterwards as well, but it's the coveted one because very few are around.
Well, yeah, I mean, the specs of the Falcon are way better. And as a machine, the Falcon 4 exceeds the Commodore competitor, the Amiga 1200. But the
Oh
thing
yeah,
is,
yeah,
the
yeah.
damage had been done already.
Yeah,
People were more invested in the Commodore ecosystem. So,
yeah, yeah,
if you've got an Amiga 500, you buy an Amiga 1200, that it's
yeah.
just the obvious progression. Whereas if you've got an ST. I mean, I went through this at the time. It was
That's
like,
a
well,
good
do I
one.
buy a Falcon? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, to be honest, I'd rather buy a PC because,
Right.
there's more software available because the Falcon wasn't so widely adopted.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
say,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the specs were great, but
Right.
it wasn't, such an
Yeah.
obvious choice because back then, I wanted to do my homework on it and I wanted to use Fast Tracker 2 and these things, and it was just purely based on the software.
Yeah.
I mean, Falcons are worth a fortune now, due to all the collectors,
I did.
and I do have a
Yeah.
couple now that I got in the early
You got a
2000s.
Falcon?
I've got two
Oh
actually,
my
yeah.
gosh. Wow. I didn't realize,
You
man.
see,
I
yeah,
didn't realize.
when I got the Falcons, I mean, they're
Wow.
about 300 quid back in, like, I don't know, 2004 or whenever I I got them. I
Wow.
think it may have been 2002.
You should write some
But
stuff
yeah,
about it.
now it's more like
Yeah.
£1,500 for a Falcon. They've just skyrocketed, and yeah, it's silly money because
They just don't come up
I
though.
quite like, for an example, an Amiga 1200,
Yeah.
but collectors are bumping up the prices. So you want to do something creative on it. And these collectors, maybe they play some retro games or something on it, but they're not pushing any boundaries, are they? So I'm a little bit
In terms of what,
sour
yeah.
about that.
What you say in terms of like just making tools for it for music production and stuff like that. And
Yeah, making tools and also making new tunes, making just
do you think it's got
yeah.
the capability to do some wicked stuff internally and otherwise interfacing and that? Would you
I
say?
think so. Yeah, I think neither machine, neither the Amiga nor the ST, have been really pushed to the limit.
Really? Wow. I did have some thoughts on what you could do future wise, but maybe that would be for another conversation, man. But yeah,
Well, the limit is only personal time, really. I mean, I'd like to do lots of things. I'd
yeah,
like
yeah.
to write my own tracker for the Amiga. I'd like to do another ST tracker.
Really?
Um,
Wow.
yeah, but the issue is,
The time.
I
Yeah.
say these things, but I just don't have time. I mean, we've all got day jobs. We need to
Yeah.
pay the mortgage and eat. So
I mean,
you know,
is it also because I mean, I know you give your track away for free, which
yeah.
is like, I suppose inevitably you make a choice where you think to yourself, is it worth selling it or is it just because that's probably what you would say in your mind. So is it actually worth selling it or is it just give it away for free, for example? But I mean, yeah, a new tracker on the Falcon would be a very cool thing, and you could probably sell that, Gwen. At a nice
Yeah, I
little,
probably could, but it wouldn't be.
yeah.
I don't think I'll be able to survive on
No, no,
that
hell
type
no.
of money.
But as you say, it's the time involved. It's the time, and then you've got to. That's the problem.
Yeah,
It'd
because
be a labor
I
of love,
know from
wouldn't
my
it?
experience with maximizer, it's going to take a year,
Yeah.
and I don't. I mean, when I wrote maximizer, it was in my 20s, and I had a lot more energy and free time, and now I've got to choose that time more carefully. So in a
Yes.
sense,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah. I
sort of
understand.
rather make music than work on tools. But having said that, I am still developing maxYMiser and releasing new versions, but the effort required to do that is a lot less now that the
Yeah. And
first version's in place.
I suppose in early 2000s, well, it wasn't like massive adoption of PCs and everything. It was more still like the Atari still was pretty relevant at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely, because people complained about the early PCs because the timing on the MIDI was a lot more sloppy than the ST was back
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
and the reason for that is the Atari is a lot more of a simple architecture, hardware and software. So
Yeah.
it's just single tasking, and there's not much else going on. So you
Gotcha.
can get really tight MIDI timing on the
Yeah.
Atari. So a lot of people did prefer it for quite a long time.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, but I think now with all the advances and the power that a modern PC has, you know, if you want to start making music now and you don't really want to spend much money or mess around with retro stuff, I mean, it's such a golden age just to buy the cheapest laptop you can.
Or an iPad like I have done.
Yeah, or an iPad. And there's so many tools that are free or very cheap.
Yeah.
Uh, and, infinite possibilities, really. I wouldn't recommend someone who's starting on music to buy an Amiga, although, you may build up to that. You might fancy that flavor later on.
Unless you pick Canon, but then maybe he's had Amiga all along. He just
Well, I mean, yeah, Pete Cannon's great, but I have the feeling that when he works on his commercial projects, like I know he does advertising music. I don't think he's using his Amiga for
no,
that. I
no,
would
no.
imagine he uses some kind of DAW, but
He seems to use it as a basis and then does enhancements and the like. It's kind of
yeah, I mean, all this old stuff, it does have a sound.
definitely
Um,
100%
I'm not, egotistical, or no, that's the wrong word.
precious.
I'm not. I'm not going to be superlative and say, the
Yeah,
only way to get it to sound like an Amiga is to use an Amiga, because I think with all the plugins and stuff that's available, you can get that retro sound with plugins, that's for sure. I mean, there's like incredible 303 plugins. They sound just like the real thing. I'm not going to be elitist about gear, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you want to sound like an Amiga, then using an Amiga is like one surefire way to be able to achieve it in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't, there was this VST Amigo. I don't know if you remember that. I remember I
yeah,
sent,
yeah. I
sent
had a
you.
little play with it. I mean, it's good if you're used. If you've got your DAW of choice, let's say,
Yeah,
and you want a bit of Amiga flavor, then that is a great thing. But it's not always just about the sound. For the musician, obviously for the listener, they just care about the sound, but you care about workflow, right?
exactly.
So
Exactly.
something like, I know that we are both very fond of the Roland TR-707, for
Yeah, yeah,
example, which
yeah,
has a great workflow.
yeah, yeah.
Now with some TR-707 samples, you can sound just like it, but it's not as fun as you know.
Except it doesn't have the wild panning as well, which you get from a 707.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild machine, the 707.
You put on your headphones and you're like, "What? Tom's this over there. Tom's over there." Rim shots. Well, I think the rim shots were centered from what I recall in the cowbell, but some of them were like all over the shop. You're like, "Whoa, where did they
Yeah,
come
the
up with this
panning
idea
is
from?"
it is. But it sounds very punchy, the 707, and the interface is
It's hot,
nice. You've
isn't
got
it? It's
the
a hot.
roll and 16 step, and you can jam a bit with those sliders and stuff.
Yeah,
You
I
can't.
think the 505 is a hot output though as well. When you put the 505 on the headphones as well, or even put it through an amp, you're like, "Whoa, that is coming out hot." Do you know what I'm saying? It's
Mm,
like loud. Um, I think the 505 for me has some quite punchy sounds though. Like it's a
mm,
different flavor. It's not. obviously there's some sounds which are the same as the 707, like the open hi-hat, I think it's basically the same. I think the close hi, yeah, the close hi-hat is definitely different, 100%. The clap's the same, but the kick, I like the kick on the 505. It's got like kind of that, it's got a bit more of a thud to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I don't know if this is true, but I read online that Vince Clarke's favorite kick drum is the 505,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it definitely has that sort of, yeah, as you say, quite thick 80s type of flavor to it. You know, it's a bit EBM.
Yeah, it's going to cut through a bit better, I think, definitely. The 707's, its Achilles heel for me was always the kick. Like, but
It needs a lot
you've
of
got,
processing.
it
Yeah,
requires exactly, and you've got to make sure everything is not kind of pushing that out too much.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
think
we've
it
chatted
can
about it.
sound all right
Mm.
if you put it through an external compressor on a really extreme setting and then turn down the mids.
Right, right,
I
right.
mean, but you've got to be quite extreme with the processing
But it's got the
to get it
outs. It's got the
pumped.
outs, hasn't it? It's got all the outs.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we've got 2 minutes left, but what we'll do, we'll continue probably to the next bit. But like,
All
so
right.
let's talk about the Ambient Odyssey. Like, what was your inspiration behind that, man?
Yeah, so I've been a fan of Krautrock for some time, and I've always really respected the noise stuff. And with Michael Rota was the guitarist,
Yeah.
and I love the way he plays. It's very modal, you know. And actually, I went to see a concert of his in the Barbican,
Yeah.
and I left that thinking, it's about time, I did, something ambient myself. Um, just put aside, um, the break beats and kind of go back to the guitar and try and produce something organically.
Yeah.
Quite often, when you perform live as an electronic musician, you've got something that's pre-prepared, right? So
Yeah.
some people will even just play the MP3,
Yeah.
or some people will have some loops that they switch between, or some people will DJ their tracks, or fire off samples. But these approaches are all cool, but you're
Yeah.
still relying on stuff that's been pre-prepared, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I wanted to also to do something which was completely improvised with nothing whatsoever prepared, no loops,
We're going to
nothing like that.
segue, Gwen, we'll segue into the next section.
Yeah.
Pause it here. We'll
Okay.
pause it here. We'll segue into the next section. So yeah, we were just chatting previously. We got cut off rudely by Zoom, and Gwen was talking about his latest record, so he's going to continue on.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I got
You
to,
was
but
talking
yeah,
about your influence
basically,
on it and
I
Noy and
remember. Yeah,
Michael Rother and
I've been to see Michael Rota live, and I also had this sort of longing for wanting to prepare a live show that was really truly live without any preparations. Now, I thought a good way, naturally, I sort of thought, well, an ambient project,
yeah, 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 yeah,
I hadn't done one of those before,
yeah,
and I've always, as I said, been into krautrock
yeah,
and
yeah.
particularly guitar based ambient music. There's also an old guitarist called Uli John Roth, who I'm a big fan of. A bit more, I wouldn't really call him an ambient guitarist,
Yeah.
but he does do quite a bit of atmospheric stuff with volume swells, and he also has a very modal approach to his guitar playing.
Hmm.
So I wanted to do the same. Now, the thing is, little did I know that actually there's quite a lot of preparation that goes into ambient music, actually.
It sounds
So
like it. Yeah, it sounds like it.
yeah, so what you hear on the album is 100% performed live
Yeah,
as I wanted,
yeah.
but getting the textures, dialing in the effects, it can take hours.
Wow, wow. We're just
Um,
experimenting and trying to get that vibe and
Yeah, exactly. The
Yeah, it sounded like it.
experimentation
As I was
part.
listening, I think
And
I thought I bet gwEm spent a long time crafting this.
yeah, yeah, that I exactly did. So getting the effects chain and all of that, that took weeks actually. And
Wow.
then once it's recorded, the editing it has to be done very sensitively.
Mm.
You don't want it to be too long, but then if it's too short, you don't have a chance to build up a vibe. So I spent quite a long time choosing the parts that I wanted, and the editing was a lot of work. So really, I probably spent as much
So
effort on it as I
you're
would.
doing your reel to reels around the flat, as it were, the strips of reel.
Yeah. Well, the editing was all done in Ableton, but back in the 70s, I'd obviously have used the reel to reel, and I've spent
That,
ages splicing
yeah,
sections
yeah,
and stuff like that. But in reality, probably spent as much time working on it as a normal release. But it was quite an eye opener seeing you're just moving the effort to a different place.
yeah. No, honestly, like that's probably my favorite one. You're breaking the breaking entering second. Like I've heard of yours. Like, but I listened
Mm.
to it. I literally purchased it the other day, guys. You've got to purchase this for gwEm. I'm telling you, not for gwEm, but just for any. It's a wicked release. I purchased it and I put it on straight away. I was like, yeah, that's it, man. Yeah, just love it. It's just got the vibe, you know. It's I don't know how to describe it. It's
Well,
kind of new agey, but I guess that's it's peaceful music and it's contemplative music, you know.
I think there's a bit of new age in there. I
Yeah,
mean, I've always liked Enya. I mean, I
yeah,
wasn't setting out to do a new age thing,
a little
but
bit, yeah,
definitely, I think a bit of
yeah.
that has crept in there. Some of those nature sounds.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's a bit new agey, definitely. I'm pleased you like it, Aaron, because it was very much a departure from like the normal rave, breakbeat, chiptune,
Yeah,
banger type territory.
yeah.
Um, and I thought, well, I might alienate a few people, but I've had good comments about it. I mean, obviously, it's not for everyone, and the downloads are a little bit down, but I expected that. It's
Did
I think
you?
a lot of people would have done a different project name, but I wanted
Yeah,
to
that's what I was
keep
about to
it all
say.
under gwEm, and I've got no regrets about that. And people know that I will return to writing some breakbeat hardcore, so
Breakbeat
I think
hardcore with a bit of
they'll
ambient, man.
accept a little deviation.
Yeah, I mean. What can I say? It was a great vibe back in the 90s, like especially with all that kind of style of, and then just taking inspiration from the 70s and early 80s, Hillage and Noi, Krautrock, Tangerine Dream, all those guys. And like I came at it from a completely weird way. I wasn't getting into I of course I heard Prodigy before I heard all that stuff. Of course I did, because my sis it hit the charts, and but it was just kind of like another bunch of music to me. It wasn't really like, oh, this is rave, I've got to follow it, or this is that, or whatever. It was just like, oh, it's another bunch of tunes. My sister she would tape everything, some good and some not so good. Um, but yeah, I started listening to that. That was my passion initially, was serious passion was ambient music. So of course, when I heard your record, I was like, yeah, Ambient Odyssey, man.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a few multidisciplinary artists back then. I'm thinking of Aphex Twin,
Yeah,
obviously, who did a bunch of ambient stuff as
it was
well as
loads. It was
breakbeat.
loads. It was a big scene, wasn't it? You had Mixed
Yeah,
Master
yeah,
Morris.
absolutely. A lot of that
The
Warp,
Orb,
Planet Muse stuff.
RNS was good and all that. There were loads of labels. It was a massive Pete Nam look. Do you remember all those guys and from Germany
Well,
and
I remember some of them. I mean, we've spoken about this in the past, and you're definitely more of an ambient head than me. But obviously, I was aware of the boom, and
yeah, it was the reverse. Like you're
Orchestra is
more hard.
probably
You're
the
probably like there's loads of folks that I know that will just like they know their hardcore stuff. They knew their jungle stuff. Me, I was the opposite. I was like all the ambient stuff. when I first heard jungle, I was like, what is this clatter noise? I was like,
Yeah, but it's interesting because yeah, it is like that. But in those jungle pieces, quite often there'll be like an ambient section to it.
yeah,
And although it won't be very long necessarily, there's some quite big pads, and
yeah,
they I think the discipline of ambient music has been used in those genres, but the way you listen to it is completely different, right? Because I think when
definitely.
you listen to ambient music, it's something that you take your time to listen to it, and you listen to the ebbs and flows, and it's
It's more of a whole experience. Not whole, it's more kind of
yes,
timeless. It's not time. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you don't want it to end.
yeah,
Like, well,
right.
let's
It's
put
a
on the next tune.
vibe,
Do you get what?
and obviously it does have to end, but it needs to be a certain length before you get into the vibe of it. Whereas with like a jungle tune, okay, you might have a little 15-second ambient breakdown, but you don't listen to it in the same way
Yeah,
because it's highly sequenced, highly arranged. It is dance music, so it bangs, and you expect things to happen at certain times. Whereas with an ambient piece, you're
yeah,
not exactly sure what to expect when you listen to it for the first time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was an interview with the chap with Tom Middleton. You know, obviously Tom Middleton from Global Comms. He worked with Aphex back in the day. I think the chap that asked him, he said mentioned about a resurgence of ambient music. Would that be cool, or what's your thinking on that? Or you,
I mean, I think people
I,
should. I mean, it would be cool to have a resurgence in ambient music, but I've always thought people should make whatever music they want to make, and
yeah,
um,
like my little Latin tune that I said you.
yeah, that was nice, man. But I think if you're an artist, then you want to experiment a bit. I think that's in the nature of it,
Yeah,
and sometimes with the like top 40 stuff, generally you don't hear much experimentation, but like with underground, if you want to make an electro tune, then I would encourage you to go and do that. If you want to make ambient music, then definitely, because at the end of the day, you're the producer and you've got to please yourself.
definitely, definitely. If you can't enjoy it, then I don't think anyone else is going to enjoy it. Or if they don't enjoy it, so be it. But at the end of the day, like you say, I mean, I think what I learned for all of this is, as you probably know, and you've illustrated, you can't please everybody, but
Yeah.
you got to do what's kind of true to your heart. And if you felt like, no, I want to do this record, then in time, I'm sure for me, these things make sense and they have impact, and they do. Believe me, that's my view anyway. But
No, I think you're right. Some things can be slow burners as well. Like that maximizer tracker is a very good example of a slow burner because
yeah,
the first 2 or 3 years, I would say, was not widely adopted.
yeah,
And I was a little disappointed, but yeah, then it really was adopted, and now it's
okay,
the most used tracker on the SC, which is great. But it,
wow,
it took a while
that's
for
crazy.
people to realize that. So yeah, you never quite know how things are going to be received in 5 years.
Yeah. And what would you say is the future then before we just wrap up our part? Well, this is a whole sequence, but yeah. What would you say the
Yeah.
future is like in terms of like how do you sort of see for yourself personally what you wanna where you wanna fit within music and let's not
I,
talk about
I
the
think
future
I've
too much, it's a
reached.
bit bleak, isn't it? But
Yeah, I think in a way I've reached a state of peace with the music.
yeah,
Um, but there is a lot of stuff
yeah,
I want to do. So I want to go back and do more drum and bass. I've always had a big soft
yeah, yeah,
spot for
yeah,
electro.
yeah.
If you go
Once,
through my back catalogue, you can see littered
Yeah.
through there is bits and pieces of electro. So that'll be something I'll come back to. So uh, I mean, generally, I just sort of follow my nose, and
Yeah.
if I fancy doing something, I will. I might do some more punky stuff again. It also depends on what time I have to spare.
Yeah. Oh, wicked, man. So a certain party decided into my room, as I'm sure you spotted. So we're gonna, but yeah, no, it's been like this is the second ever interview I've done on my channel, and yeah, I must admit, I really was like really looking forward to this. 'Cause I mean, obviously we talk all the time, so it's like probably good for you just to chat. I mean, I chat to, I can chat for England as you know, but I mean, I thought, well, I'll let gwEm do the chatting today and just basically, I know there's loads of other things we could have spoken about, like all your hardware and everything, but um, yeah, man, it's been a wicked interview, and obviously, I just want to say to anyone listening, download that Ambient Odyssey. It is wicked. And support gwEm. You know, he does everything under the sun, and he's an awesome artist. So yeah, man, and pleasure having gwEm from his place in Holland at the moment.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Aaron, and I hope your viewers will enjoy watching it. And yeah, like just for them to say, if you want to achieve something in your art or your music, go for it. There's never been a better time.
Yeah,
The the quality tools are there, and they're not expensive, so you get out there and make stuff.
wicked, man, awesome.